Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, welcome. And thank you so very much for joining us. It is an absolute honour, privilege and pleasure to bring to you this series of masterclasses. As you may or may not know, I'm Kim Serafini, the founder and CEO of Positive Prime. Today, we're going to share some special time with Professor Selena Bartlett. Dr. Bartlett is an extraordinary woman by global standards, and she's a professor of neuroscience. I am in awe of her, particularly because she's actually very down-to-earth, approachable and lovely, and not only beautiful in her heart and physically, but a very, very, very clever lady doing amazing work on the planet. So without further ado, Selena, welcome, thank you. And tell us a little bit about what you're really passionate about, what you're working on, who you are, and we'll guide everybody to actually really get to know you even more deeply on your website and through the entrepreneurial pursuits that you're really fired up about, and of course your book.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you for having me on this amazing platform. I really believe in Positive Prime. So I'm a neuroscientist. I've been studying the brain for 30 years and I'm continuing to do that, and I'm absolutely passionate about it. And as I showed you before we started this, I showed you one of our little neurons sitting over there on the screen and how we can watch them changing. So you want to know why I did this and why I keep doing it is because my sister suffered from a mental health problem in the late 80s in Brisbane. I did not like how she was treated. I was a pharmacist at the time. So I went back, did my PhD, and I've been training ever since to understand how the brain works so I can actually improve the lives of people. Now in this journey, which is very long, and I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but just to say the latest breakthrough that I'm so excited to be sharing with all of your audience and the world is that the brain has a massive untapped potential for change. But the things that we're doing around our mindset, our health, our exercise, all of these things keeps our brain locked down, and it makes doing these changes really difficult. And trust me, I know I've been there. And so why I'm so passionate about this is because I want to teach people how the brain works so that they too, right now, listening to this podcast, can actually go out and do something for themselves that will change their brain in a good direction. And that's what I'm so passionate about. That's why I wrote my book for a general audience called Smashing Mindset. Because honestly, Kim, you have to smash your mindset to start the whole Positive Prime journey, to start unlocking human potential. And I call it brain power, not willpower. Because willpower is something you're making yourself do, and then eventually it breaks down and then you beat yourself up. Brain power is the ability of the brain to change physically. And so when you're doing these things for yourself, like Positive Prime, like getting up early, disciplining yourself, you're making the brain move in a really positive direction. That's really good for your health, your brain. I mean, I could talk about this for days and centuries, as you know, but that's who I am. I'm very passionate about getting this to people, into people's hands.
Now, Selena, you are a doctor, and I do love that you said that you're a pharmacist. For those people around the world, is that the equivalent of being a chemist, or really the apothecary tradition in Europe? That's really about chemicals, isn't it?
Yes. So, Kim, I know all about medication, right? I spent the first 20 years of my research career developing medications to treat mental health problems because I thought that was the best approach. I pull the brain down to its pieces. I've traveled the world. I've been in many labs doing that. And I'm famous for some of that. But what I discovered in that journey, when I was in San Francisco, a girl set up a lab next to me doing brain plasticity research. What we mean by that is showing an adult brain has the capacity to change forever. And she took me into her lab and she showed me. She had these animals on a treadmill. She had opened the skull and she could see the synapses changing in adult brains. And I went, shit, I got this all wrong. I got this wrong. So when on my transfer back to Australia, I re-geared and retooled my whole research lab because I was on a path that I could see is valuable. Don't get me wrong, because I'm medically trained. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a pharmacist by training, but I did my PhD in neuroscience, and all my postdoctoral training, I did it in Canberra at the best neuroscience program. And then I moved to UCSF with 2 little kids in California, like a 3-month-old and a 3-year-old. And I started a lab there, and I ended up running a medications development lab, Kim. So I've seen everything, I've done everything, I've explored everything. And this to me is the most untapped, best thing I've discovered in those 30 years. I know it's not the end of the journey. I know there's no cure-all. I just know that this is another little thing on the journey. But this thing is powerful. That brain inside our skull that we can't see is so powerful in both directions, good and bad, but it kind of likes the bad more than the good. And that's just evolution.
Okay, so you and I understand the reptilian brain and how it changes from the logical, rational parts of ourselves. So talk to us a little bit about some of the really cool things that you now understand about how the brain works optimally. And is there anything that we can do as human beings who are just normal, average people in terms of being at our best and performing at our peak?
Yes, so there's many things. First of all, I really, really believe that knowledge raises all boats. How can you change anything if you don't understand how it works? So that's why I've started in this direction, teaching people little things. Like, we understand the reptilian brain, but not everyone does. They need to. They need to. And how can we get that to people so it's really easy to understand? And that's why I wrote my book, Smashing Mindset, to teach people this stuff that we're talking about, this reptilian thing, is actually even further back. It's in bacteria. It's in the roots of tree plants. It's stuff that the brain used because it's so incredibly good for our survival. But it just has some faults and some defects, and negative things that come into our life activate that base brain. And then it stops the thinking human part of the brain from functioning correctly. That's just how it works. So if the audience wants to do one thing right this second, and I encourage you to do this too, Kim, is push your shoulders right back and take a really deep breath, like all the way in, not just in for force, deep down to your belly, chest, head. And this is a Wim Hof technique that's now published. And what are we doing? We're bringing in oxygen into the whole of our body. And that oxygen goes into these little things called mitochondria, give you more energy. And it actually calms this old part of your brain down immediately, right? You just did that. You just got bloody control over your reptilian brain, right?
Yeah, wow.
I know it sounds too simple, but honestly it is. And I didn't want to believe that either. I was like pulling the brain apart, developing drugs like Chantix for alcohol addiction. That was me. You know, I'm a pharmacist by training. I really believe that was the solution, and it's partly there. But doing these simple things for yourself every day, they're simple, but they're not easy, right? As you know, we need Positive Prime. We need these apps. We need this education because it's simple, but people don't want to believe it's that easy because it takes discipline. And the brain wants to keep us stuck in our old habits because it's simple. You know, it saves energy. You don't have to think. You just keep doing the same thing over and over again. So I encourage people, if there's something they could do from this day for the next 28 days, it was just simply do the deep breathing every day. Because if you can't remember to do that every day, forget about changing your life. That's what I say. You can't. If you can't remember to do deep breathing every day, how the hell are you meant to remember I'm changing my life, right? And that's why diets fail too. In the long term, they're great for 4 months and you look fantastic and everyone's giving you encouragement. But by 8 months, the brain's back like, oh, give me that. Oh, that's really good, right? Because you're in deprivation mode. So the only way we can change this is we have to retrain the brain. And it just takes time and practice and effort. And the greatest learnings that I've had in the last year, and I'm going to write an article on this, food is my medicine. Like, that's just a whole other session we could do on how I retrain my thyroid. And I got, like, it's just amazing on food alone. I changed food and I did all the blood tests. I've got all of the graphs from my doctor. My doctor said, how did you do that? And I said, and I told them, they went, that's amazing. So, you know, I want to share that with the audience at some point, but there's just so many things. This deep breathing, I can't speak highly enough about that. Forget about what your brain's doing, just do the breathing. Just don't even think about meditation, anything, which is all great, but it's just too hard for people. They think, how can I sit there for 20 minutes? You know, I don't have time. You can breathe deeply any part of the day, any time, you know, so, and I can show you how that works. And I'm just learning so much more too. Like I started on this journey about how the brain works, but I've actually now applied a whole new set of principles, and I've actually changed my body and my brain even further. So the brain has this massive untapped potential, and it can be changed even if you're 89, 100. You can do it now. You don't have to be 25, Kim, as you know, you do it. It's miraculous, you know, like, and I guess I'm really passionate about this because I'm sick of people suffering. And I sit in a group of my friends, and you're not allowed to help your friends because they don't want to be helped, but I sit there and listen to all the suffering and their bodies going down. And I'm just sitting there going, look, guys, I know that you don't believe me, but this is possible. You don't have to suffer. I mean, suffering's fine, but I don't know, happy, healthy and strong. That's the Wim Hof Iceman techniques, and it really works. And not only can you just train these kind of conscious parts of your brain, you know what he went and published, like it's published, he's trained his autonomic nervous system, the part we didn't think could be trained, like your core temperature, your immune system, he's retrained that.
Selena, I have to ask you, I mean, out of the blue, are you friends with Professor Mark Cohen? Because I've known him for like 20 years in the spa industry, and he was originally at RMIT. Do you know Mark Cohen?
What's his last? No.
Wow. You two must know each other.
Mark,
I'm going to introduce you.
Was he's not from New Zealand?
He actually has been really an extraordinary pioneer in the spa industry commercially. But he is doing these new retreats on extreme health, and it's all about training essentially for bathing. All of it's around bathing and frozen water.
Oh, I just did a talk in San Francisco on bathhouses, and I was the neuroscientist that they brought in to talk about the power of bathhouses.
So he's a medical doctor, and he's a professor he's actually just finished. He spent, decades as a professor at a university in Victoria. Anyway, for the rest of the audience, we'll get on to all of that because Professor Mark Cohen is actually somebody who has developed a session with us so that he can actually share his message within this positive prime context. All right, so Selena, let's just talk really briefly with our audience about why their brains can be changed and why it is for so long we have believed that they can't necessarily be changed. And what you think is one of the reasons why people who, for example, know what to do but then don't do it, and what is it about us as human beings and our nature and our ability or inability to change? Because you and I both believe that change is not only necessary, it's actually graceful, it's inevitable. You can actually have fun doing it. It's a lot easier than most people think. And actually discipline and willpower is the worst path to go down.
Yeah. So we taught the brain couldn't be changed. Neuroscientists taught that right up until, that's why I didn't believe it either. It took me 10 years to change my own mindset and re-gear my lab. So I was totally in that element too. And it all happened because of visual neuroscience, because we could map all the pathways from the eye back to the visual cortex, and we could map it out very specifically. And there are certain things in your brain where we can show you how your hands move, right? So it seemed like it was set. It was changing up until the age of 25, but after the age of 25, we said the brain was kind of set. And that's kind of where it came in. But like with all science, there was a whole group of people showing the brain could change, but they were ignored. And that's like everything in the world, right? Science has a group of people that say this and a group of people that say something else, and then normally the majority win. But that's the nature of improvement and progression, you've got to argue, because you can't just say it is, because then that ends up causing another problem, right? Because then you just believe that without questioning. So anyway, and probably now with brain imaging, so we can actually see inside the brain, and there's been all these experiments to demonstrate, you know, like doing this with your fingers, right? We've actually mapped the part of the brain, and then we can show it expands. And if you want to look at a long-term example of this, they actually imaged the brain of Buddhist monks. They flew them over from Tibet to the US, and this research was done by Sarah Laser at Harvard. And she showed, it kind of started with Richard Davidson, where he scanned the brains of these monks, and basically they had a shrunken amygdala response to fear and an enhanced response in the top part of their brain to thinking. And then they went and did this study on Harvard students and showed that 20 minutes of mindfulness can somewhat mimic these 40,000 hours of meditation that these monks had changed their brains with. So that's an extreme example, but they've been doing this for 2,000 years, right? So they can actually watch emotions just flip up, and they don't respond to any emotions, like 82 emotions that we have. The really well-trained monks can actually sit back from that, and they just pass through, and they name them, but they don't react to them. And I think the amazing example is a monk that was in a brain scanner, and they flipped something that would scare him. He just didn't respond. Like all of us would go off. You know, it's this fear response. He didn't have it, as an example. So all of this evidence is just accumulating. It's more about technology and being able to see it, I think, because people don't believe it unless you can see something, and then the research behind it. I mean, other people that are really skeptical say, yeah, we've known that for 100 years or whatever. But it does take people demonstrating it. And that was for me too. And then doing it myself. So I've been using myself as a personal guinea pig, and I've completely changed not just my hair color, but, you know, most of my life and my body, because I was also very fat and unhealthy before I moved back to Australia, because I was working, raising a family, really stressed out. I didn't even think I was, by the way. Didn't notice. Until I get back here, I'm like, oh my God, I'm really sick and unhealthy. And so all of this has come from that too. So I've seen it for myself, and I keep exploring and expanding and learning and bringing in new techniques and listening to other people. I've just become way more open-minded about what I don't know. The more you know, the more you don't know. And there's going to be a lot coming. Now, to get the point, why are people stuck? Why was I stuck? And why is it so hard? It is hard for the change, right, to maintain it. And that's because our lifestyle basically has shut down the brain, and it's reactivated this reptilian, it makes this reptilian brain super activated. So it's becoming more and more primed for stress. So if you eat badly or you drink a lot, this part of the brain gets super activated, which then shuts down the thinking, rational part of your brain, which just leaves you stuck. And you know that feeling when you feel like you're sitting in mud and you can't move? It's taken out your dopamine. So you have no capacity to initiate change unless you do something dramatic, like a cold shower, for example. It'll activate your brain. So why did this happen? And why is it some families, or even within families, there's differences between people that are super open-minded and then people are super stuck? And they'll say to me, but they were raised in the same environment. Why is that person addicted to drugs? And why is this person the CEO of a company, right? And this is because we now know that you can inherit your brain and this kind of reactionary part of your brain over multiple generations. You're not born with a blank slate. You're just not. Like, because we kind of treat people like they're born with a blank slate.
And do you know what's amazing is, Selena, people don't even really fathom how wild it is what you are saying, because now we actually know, right? We may have had an inkling, we may have had some intuition, we may have had
talk
some
about your uncle.
There may have been some
talk
wisdom.
about Uncle Bill, for example.
Yeah. Okay. So, because one of the other things that I think that is actually downloading to me right now is we need a series of masterclasses with Professor Selena Bartlett, not just the first of one interview. So we might actually explore that for the audience. The audience needs to let us know if they want to do that.
One I'd highly recommend, because I'd love to help people in this regard, because I was nearly put on a drug for my thyroid, right? Because I did not expect this, and my sister told me to go and have it tested, and I did, and I was out of range. I changed my diet. because I'd already exercising, I'd already taken down sugar and alcohol and blah, 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 right? Managing stress with brain training. And then I was shocked to see I was out of range for thyroid stimulating hormone. Last thing I expected. Anyway, and then for some ungod reason, I was doing these Rich Roll podcasts and David Goggins, because I really like doing hard stuff to improve myself. And so I became a vegan, basically. I became plant-based in June after my test results, not on purpose, but just to try it. By August, my numbers had halved. By December, I'm back in range. And the doctor said, are you serious? And my glucose has gone down, my cholesterol has gone down, my triglycerides have gone down. And I sent it to my sister, who's a medical doctor, because she has the same thing going on. And I just said, can you believe this? I know this was the diet, because this is all I changed. I might have upped my exercise a bit or whatever, right? And it's not for everyone. Everyone's body's different. But that to me is powerful, because I don't have to take a Roxine for the rest of my life right now, which affects all of your metabolism and, you know, blah, blah, blah. So that's a whole nother session, but that's, I think, very important. And that's like brain training. You know, it was brain training, mindset, you know, saying to yourself that you can heal it, you know. And my mother taught me a lot of this too, and she does it for herself too. You know, we've got to lean into the painful stuff, Kim. We've got to do the hard stuff, because that's where we get proud of ourselves. That's where the growth takes place. And we don't want to do the hard stuff. Our brains resist. It's just like, oh, I like going back to the bed. I just want to watch my, you know, my episodes on TV, and I want to have my chips and my wine, and I'm happy as a lamb. But the brain doesn't love that very much in the long term. It's okay for a day, but if you do it multiple times, it just shows up, you know.
Yeah, wow. So you're doing some clinical trials at the moment. I just want to jump into and almost head off to, you're particularly fascinated and arguably the world's leading researcher on the brain and sugar, which is a very hot, popular subject, particularly if you read celebrity magazines. Yeah. But why and how is it really much more than just some kind of fad story about being on some kind of freakish diet?
Yeah, well, so my lab was the first to show sugar is as addictive as alcohol and nicotine. And I did that on my transition back from America to Australia. So I'm known for alcohol research. I'm an alcohol neuroscience researcher, and we showed the nicotinic receptors. Uh-oh, is that okay?
You're great.
Okay. We showed the nicotinic receptors are activated by alcohol, right? So part of our control experiments was to have the animals drinking sugar, so we could mimic all the behavioral effects of alcohol and try and match it calorically. So I was collaborating with someone at Stanford Research International, who's the expert at looking at nicotinic receptors in the brain. On my way back, so she had all these brains. On my way back, she called me in the February and she said, oh my God, Selena, you won't believe this. But those sugar animals are changing their nicotinic receptors in exactly the same way as your alcohol animals and my nicotine animals. And I just went, no way, no way. And luckily we had another experiment in the pipeline as another control. So I had a PhD student replicate it over 4 years after I returned. And we went on to demonstrate that sugar can activate the endogenous neurotransmitters in the brain that activate nicotinic receptors, which is nicotine's the most addictive drug in the world. So sugar is changing, and then we went on to show that sugar is changing the neural pathways inside the brain.
And is it bad?
Yes, incredibly bad, because it takes down your impulse control center in the prefrontal cortex, which makes it harder to resist. It activates this reptilian brain to make you more stressed, like alcohol does in the long term. In the short term, it relieves, right? You get a hit, and then the next day you feel terrible, right? So that's why it's activating the reptilian brain. Now, the thing about sugar that people can't understand, they kind of doubt it, but it's become embedded in the food chain. It's in 75% of all processed food. And it's fructose component, which you've probably read about. But why that matters is because it activates the hypothalamus, makes you hungrier for other food. You never feel full when you've eaten a lot of sugar. And then the second thing, the energy, because your body can't handle it, it stores it in fat cells that line your stomach and your thighs, and then it's really hard to get rid of. They're like little gas chambers. and they multiply like cancer cells. They're called visceral fat cells. And fructose energy gets stored in those visceral fat cells. And that's why it's so hard to lose that particular weight, especially if you're a woman in your 50s, because you've got the menopausal thing, you've got a hormonal change, you've got other stresses, and et cetera, et cetera. That's why people still struggle, even though they're dieting, they're exercising, they still struggle with that particular part of their body. That's why. So people will work out, then they'll reward themselves with a Frappuccino. And that I like to say that Frappuccino, it might be 500 calories, but to your body at your age and all sorts of other things, it's like 5,000 calories to get rid of.
Wow.
It's like a 10x thing, you see. So this is the bit why I'm so passionate about helping people with that, because if we can take down the amount of added sugar down to the recommended guidelines, then people start to shrink those fat cells, because you can't get rid of them, but you can shrink them, and immediately you get a reduction in waist circumference. And you start to feel less stress, and you have more impulse control to resist eating more food, you see. So wow. This is well known, and it's not everything, right? It's not I'm not saying it's a panacea or anything. I'm just saying it's one component. Also, low, carbs in bread. I mean, there's many things, and every body's slightly different. Not everyone has a lot of sugar. They might have fat instead or whatever, but you just need to know that each of these things you're eating or doing is actually changing your brain and making it harder to do other things. And that's the key. That's why I'm so passionate about that, because I know that when I help people reduce that, it makes other things easier to do.
Okay, so for purely selfish reasons, I actually want to dive into some of the content that we have in some of our sessions within Positive Prime. So, of course, this is unscripted, so I don't know what your answers are going to be. So it might actually completely change the way that we develop some of our products. But if I was to now understand that more green leafy vegetables was important for my diet, and if I increased that amount and I didn't actually consume so many processed meals, if I was seeing photographs of those green leafy vegetables, would my visual cortex process that and in some way prime me to actually lean towards those kinds of foods? Or is it not that simple?
I mean, I wish it could be that simple, but only a little bit simple. I don't think it would be enough to take out the cravings. So the sugar goes into all of your systems.
Okay.
And it's already been stored. Like it's already...
If you cut sugar out of your diet as much as possible, you basically make these conscious decisions to eat more pure, natural foods, almost from the source, completely unadulterated.
I think that for people, what I recommend is you just take your worst thing first and just reduce it. So it's like, those micro habits, atomic habits, little tiny things, doing the breathing first, honestly. If this is a concern for you, if sugar is your thing that you go to at night because you're really stressed out, or alcohol, you have to get to the source, right? And that's what we're all about. The source is stress. And it's stress that's been wired in over millions of years. That's the source. The sugar's just the symptom. So totally. Same for alcohol, nicotine, lashing out, all of it. That's just symptoms of a super activated bottom part of the brain. The emotional part of the brain. It's been super activated over multiple generations, and all your lifestyle, your years of living have changed that part of the brain. And sugar is the way that it mitigates it all. Like it's a medication. Food is a medication. Just remember that.
Okay. Yeah. So you've actually got to do what's necessary to calm the brain.
Definitely, because it just makes the other things easier. Because if you try and do these other things, which we're used to doing, I'm just going to do this, I'm just going to do that, it becomes like a chore and you don't see the results. And so you just say, stuff it, I don't see any results. I'm just going to keep doing what I was doing, because why not? Whereas these other things, because you're getting to the source, you start to see solutions much faster, in my view. And anyone can do deep breathing straight away and go, oh, I can do that. So I like giving people the simplest, easiest things to do where they can get a change straight away. So I'll give you my example in terms of what I did, right? I got a standing desk. I started to reduce some of my sugar intake. And then what I did was the deep breathing, you could do it as soon as you wake up in the morning. As soon as you wake up in the morning, you just lie there for 1 minute. And that's all you have to do to start off your brain in a good direction, right? So in terms of those pictures you're talking about, I would highly recommend, if you have some beautiful pictures to prime someone's brain, that will help, rather than going straight to their phone going, oh my God, I missed this, I've got to do this. Oh my God, how are we going to pay the bills? Oh my God, I've got to get the kids to school. I've got to make the lunches. Oh my God, my husband's not helping me, or I'm not helping, you know, blah, 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 right? Because the brain loves that kind of stuff. So anything we can do to change that story is very helpful. So that's what I love about Positive Prime. You've got to prime your brain for all of this stuff. And that's the beginning of the journey.
Wow. I just, of course, I love how down to earth you are, Selena, because I would imagine that a lot of neuroscientists who are still stuck in their ego need to convince people how clever they are. So they use language that, quite frankly, is just not relatable. It's just...
Yeah, I could easily do that. And I do get laughed at because people think I went to the other side. But to be honest, Kim, if I hadn't done everything I'd done to get to me to this point, I couldn't do what I'm doing with you today. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't have broken this down 25 years ago because I wouldn't have known I was right. Not that I'm right, but I wouldn't have known what I didn't know. So I've developed drugs for 20 years. I've worked in multiple research neuroscience institutes. I've broken the brain down to its synapses and its molecules and its genetics and its epigenetics. We're looking at microRNAs, which is the next big thing, right? That's how we inherit things multi-generationally. I need to understand all of that to be able to simplify the message of what I'm delivering today. And also I have to be the message. So if you're not doing it yourself, it's just air, in my view. So they say there's 3 things to influence people to actually make a change. And I've learned a few little things along the way. It's writing, it's speaking, and it's being what you say you are. Doing what you say is good. And if you can't do that, then just don't do it. Because I think it all dies eventually because people look and say, well, you seem real. Well, I'm not perfect at all. I'm stressed out most of the time too, but I'm working on it. You know what I mean? And I exercise every day now, and I watch what I eat now, and you know, just a whole lot of things, but I love it because it makes me feel proud of myself. It's not easy, but it's better, right? So I'm a country girl, Kim, too, by the way. So I'm from Nanango. So I'm a simple person, and I like simple language, and I want to help people. So my whole purpose of becoming a neuroscientist was not to get famous for that, was to understand the brain, because I didn't like how, my sister's now not with me, I did not like how she was treated. And it was clear back in the 90s, we knew nothing about how the brain worked. And we just kept adding drugs and adding drugs and adding drugs until they stopped working, and then she was left with nothing. And so I said, my mission for my life is to stop the word mental health, make it brain health, because anyone can tap into brain power, right? It's just physical. You don't need to go, oh, I've got to do that. I've got to do that. Oh, I'm so bad. I'm so crap. No, you just need to do deep breathing every day for 28 days and then see what happens, because now you've tapped into your brain power. You're giving your brain some more oxygen and blood. It's physical, you know, it's not mental in some sense. And then the other thing I was like, I've got to understand the brain so I can improve the lives of everyday people. So experts and intellectuals and people with money, they get access to everything easily. But people that don't have those resources get access to nothing, but they need it the most. And so I spent a lot of energy in my Smashing Mindset book to bring it right back. And it does sound really simple. The book sounds really simple. And my editors even said, can you get rid of all those references? And I said, can you please just let me have my references? so people can see that I am somewhat serious. You know, because I know there'll be people in my field looking, at least they can see I referenced it. Anyway, and it's only 20,000 words. You can read it in literally 2 hours. I made all of that happen, but I have written hundreds of scientific, not 100 scientific papers, right? But no one reads them.
Now,
right?
I'll tell you, isn't that the truth? One of the one of the fascinating things about that is someone actually asked me, why do I do what I do? And I say, well, because, and I'm not a scientist, and I'm not a neuroscientist, and I'm not a positive psychologist. I'm actually really just an entrepreneur with a technology company.
Yeah.
But it does take both of us collaborating for a collective effort where we really apply. And I think that that's why you and I really connect, because it is about the applications in practical ways of what we're really learning. And there are such fine institutions with such extraordinarily intellectual researchers doing amazing work. But you're right, no one reads their papers. So how do we actually take that genius, those beautiful pearls of wisdom, and let them sparkle and shine? But you've got to share it. But you've got to be able to share it in such a way that people can actually hear it, think about what can they do with it, why do they want to do something with it.
Yeah, and Kim, the amazing thing for me, podcasts and this new technology, people always talk about the bad side, but the good side is this is a way to disseminate information like there's never been before. And even for me, myself, I've listened to about 500 podcasts in 2018. Without that, I wouldn't have run, 50 kilometers in December. I wouldn't have done the vegan thing to try it out. I wouldn't have done the blood tests, right? It was these people that were doing these things that got into my head that changed. And from that, I realized you've got to stay open-minded, because I was very closed-minded. I was very fixed in my thinking because of my training. And there's nothing wrong with that, because it helps people. There's some things that people need. I'm not dismissing anything that we understand. I'm just saying that there's a toolkit, and you want to access all parts of the toolkit and believe you can. But that takes being open-minded, and that's really tricky, right? It is. I mean, for me, every day I struggle with that, because I get into my, now I know. And then next day, I was so wrong about that. Like, I don't think that I've been right about anything, almost. So once I'd be on a journey, I'm like, now I get that. And then sure enough, nope, wrong again.
What's beautiful about that is that surely it keeps us humble. You know,
Yes.
surely it has the necessity for us to be compassionate and forgiving towards ourselves. And in fact, when we see somebody who thinks that they know it all, we don't actually have to be facetious about that. We can just have compassion, because they too are going to understand that there is a lot that they don't know that they're going to want to know.
Can we just touch briefly on one thing that I think is really important? And it's a subject that most people don't like to hear about, but I think it's very empowering. And that's the concept of adverse childhood experiences. And this is the pre-wiring, of the brain. This is the bit we had no control over, that came in over multiple generations. And there's a whole research area on that, and I've written a little bit about it in my book, and I don't want to take too much time on that, but it's the bottom line of why some people are more negatively wired than other people. And even with one family, people can get different sets of love and attention. And I don't want it to sound simplified, there's a reason, but we now know that's the prime cause of many mental health problems, addiction, obesity, anxiety, depression. It's the root cause. So it's wiring the brain for these symptoms that appear that we medicate with. Now that's the breakthrough in my view. I'm working with a charity on this to try and raise public health awareness around getting to know your ACE score, being compassionate to that, because I fundamentally believe that this is where compassion for the world comes from. When you understand that, you become incredibly compassionate to other people's brains and where they've come from and the journey that they're on. So anyway, that would be a whole other session.
I do know. I heard Heather McKenzie actually refer to her ACE score in an address that she did just recently. And for those people who don't know her, she's one of the consultants that we know in the startup scene in technologically, fast growth companies. Selena, if someone really wants to find out much more about these early childhood experiences and their impact, who would they go and Google? What book do you think that they would read? Do you know?
So in my Smashing Mindset, I have a bit in a chapter on that. There's another website called ACE Study, STUDY, So this research has been done for 25, 30 years. There's ACE, if you just Google ACE connection, you're going to get a whole lot of resources coming up. So it's very well known, very well studied. And we're now raising awareness in Australia too. But understanding that, it's just like, in my view, it's like a crystal goes off in your head and it's like, oh, that makes sense. That's why my brother, and that happened for me. Because as you know, I've been on a journey to understand why my sister got what she got, right? And in this journey, I've since discovered, oh, not where I expected to find it, but that explains what happened to me, what happened to my brother, what happened to her. And then for me as a neuroscientist, that totally opened up my world in terms of understanding and why I know brain plasticity is the way to go to help reduce that.
I was going to say, so interestingly enough, once you understand what your ACE score is, if you uncover, as sometimes some people do with something like hypnotherapy, a repressed memory, or even if they uncover something about their family's genealogical history that actually then is upsetting, what do they do about it as an adult in 2019-20?
Well, what you'll find is, I don't know about repressed memories, but to be honest, the brain, like, this is going to sound terrible, but what I recognized was I don't even know the brain I actually have. So you can't focus on just that one item because there's so many items we can't even work out, right? That came into our brain from centuries ago. So the thing I focus on, put a full stop on that, do your deep breathing for 28 days. And it's not about not ignoring it, and you can go to counselors and whatever you want to do with that. But I can tell you now, if you focus on that solely and then you get to blame something, the brain goes into that deep spiral there. So it's recognizing but letting go. Recognizing we don't know where our brain came from, but we have a massive capacity from this moment that you hear this information to change it going forward and to create the brain you want. That's the power we actually have, because epigenetics. So epigenetics is your ability to change your genes, the way they're expressed, not your baseline, not your blueprint, but the way the brain's wired. So just doing those deep breathing exercises right now, go and do 30 deep breathing exercises. You've already started on the pathway to change. Yes, I tell the ACE story just because it gives people an understanding that there's a root cause for why. It's not to spend time there because it doesn't help because you can't change it. And it's not to take it away from anyone. I'm the most compassionate. I'm just a person, and I have my own problems, but I understand that. But it's more about, I'm all about, this is what I can show you that will make a huge difference to change it. That's where I want to be.
And, you know, that's of course where we are. And, and you know what? I love these kinds of conversations because you reinforce and you reignite within me, and you help me. Like every single day I come across something that helps me recommit to this path. This is the purpose that I was born for, and that's to help you and people like you share your message and to create a tool that actually does allow people to understand the role of epigenetics, but physically then harness that and leverage that and use it for good.
Can we just add here?
Yep.
Get the power of this. You have to do it every day.
Right, okay.
That's the only thing for change. You can't change things once a week.
Okay.
Yoga is fantastic, all of it's fantastic, but once a week is like having a massage for 2 hours. You've got to do it every day because that's what, and this is the difficulty, right? Why it's simple but not easy. It's simple ideas. It's not easy because you've got to do it and remember to do it. And that's where we get stuck and things in that come in our way. You know, life is relentless. And so in those relentless moments, we just let it go. And then, shit, I've got to go back and I've forgotten. Do you know what I mean? So that's why we're like sending the books, sending the message, but it's the key is to coach and help people to sustain it for the long term. I mean, I've been on a 4-year journey so far, from when I changed my mindset. And it's the most powerful thing that's happened for me in my life. And I'm really grateful that I did it and I have it, but it's daily practice. And I still have things come at me, and I'm still a normal person, and I go off crazy on tangents. But I now have a toolkit, which I don't go into that spiral that I did a long time ago. So it can work. Every brain's different, and everyone's come from a different starting point. So this might work for me, but it may not work for the next person. So you need multiple tools, basically.
I do love you, and I just love the person that you are and the contribution you're making to mankind. Thank goodness.
It's a long journey, isn't it? It's hard because, like, Kim, the hardest thing for me is like you, when you find something like this and it's so powerful and you really want to get it to people, and then people are so resistant to hear this message. And it's not to make people feel bad about where they are or what they're doing. It's not to do that, but that's the thing that comes across. So, and I saw this with my friends just in the last week, and I'm like, oh dear, I'm not trying to be bossy or boasty, or I just want to disseminate the knowledge and information, but people take it as a comment on where they are, I think. And so I'm trying to work out, but that's what I was going to tell you. So what I learned from that, the next day, even though they were like laughing at me about it all, people start to actually put it into their life without telling you. So that's when I'm like, it's okay. My job is just to disseminate, and people can do what they like with it. Right?
Absolutely.
No judgment, nothing. And even if they can just take one little piece and it makes a huge difference or a little difference, then we've done our job. It's not about change everything. It's just about doing our job, what we're here to do. That's when I look at it, so I can feel guilty.
That is such an extraordinary insight as well. And I often think, I know you referred to His Holiness the Dalai Lama a little bit earlier, because originally of the work in neuroplasticity with Richard Davidson. And the funny thing is that ultimately, no matter how scientific we are, we come back to the same kinds of conversations about love. When we just come from our hearts and we share our best knowledge, being our best selves, and we do so generously, then quite frankly, we go and we positively change the world just by who we're being. And that's who you are, Selena.
And can I just tell you one last thing? Principle 6 in my book is all about love and attention. And it's the most unromantic version of love you're ever going to read. But if people are listening that have little kids, under 3 or even up to 14 or whatever, even adult children, the best thing you can do for your children is to hug them and give them undivided love and attention. It's the thing that counterbalances ACE score immediately and starts the epigenetic change. So between the ages of 0 and 3, the brain plasticity switches on. Between the ages of 10 and 14. So you have these 2 big windows to make massive change. Love and attention doesn't mean giving them an iPad and being next to them while you're on your iPad. It means sitting on the ground while they're playing with something, staring them in the eye and say, I'm here for you, without saying it. It's that it's that feeling that I love you no matter what. Now, if you become a beach bum, I love you. Because people don't understand that love with conditions really harms the brain, because we're all born to be part of a tribe. And I'm not trying to be spiritual, and this is totally physiologically related to serotonin, oxytocin, and all of these amazing good chemicals for your brain. So people ask me, what can I do? And we tend to focus all on partially the wrong things. And even us that have come from great families, we live in Australia, we've got an amazing environment, still parents don't understand what love and attention actually means. And okay, so now you have an 8-year-old, you missed that first window, 10 to 14, you've got another chance. And this happened for me because I didn't know any of this stuff either. And I had a 14-year-old daughter, and we went through a divorce, and it was really difficult. But because of this knowledge, I got to change the way I interacted with her, and we got a different relationship at 14. You know, so I see it for myself, but also we know this. So love and attention, what we mean by that is not helicopter parenting. It's not keeping them away from dirt. It's not letting them be free in the world. It's that undivided support behind that person, because we all need a soft place to fall and not be judged. And it's hard to do. It sounds simple, but it's actually really difficult. Even in a romantic relationship, it's hard to have that unconditional love for somebody, because it's always on conditions of X, right?
Yeah, do you know, I have all sorts of little light bulbs going off. I mean, I do believe that I am healthy mentally and emotionally. When we talk about social intelligence and emotional intelligence versus IQ, I score really, really highly, and I have some theories, and I'm now starting to read the research around it. Socially, my parents had a very broad, deep, and meaningful network, and I actually did receive that attention, care, support. And even in my 30s, when I would fall flat on my face, some kind of business disaster or career disaster, I always knew in my heart of hearts and every cell in my body that my parents would love me no matter what, and I could go to them and they would give me their non-judgmental support. Now, that didn't mean that they allowed me to wallow, because I also had that very strong parental, like my mum would, I remember going through a real phase of, there was some shock and depression, and it lasted a very short period of time, but she came in and she said, enough is enough. Now you must get up and you must go walking in nature. And effectively, she forced me to go out walking in nature for 10 kilometers, nearly 10 miles a day. She didn't know what she was doing. It was actually just, you know, wise woman wisdom.
And Kim, you just have to understand that you're very lucky. That's very
lucky.
Small percentage. It's
very
small percentage. And that was a shock to me, because I thought I was from this. It's not until it's tested that you understand that. But it has such a massive impact on people's lives. Parents just desert their children if they haven't met preconditions. And it's not their fault, because their parents did the same thing. You know, it's multi-generational. So I just want to share one story. And why I had to physically change my being was because, and it's nothing against my parents, it's just that my mother was never hugged. She never saw her parents touch each other. Her mother lost her mother at 7 years of age in Western Queensland and raised 7 boys from the age of 7. So if you know Michael Meaney's research, which I'm sure you do, that if the pups aren't licked, then the pups don't know how to lick. So I had to physically teach myself to hug my daughter. You know, consciously. It wasn't just, so it just shows you, it's not, like I loved her, don't get me wrong, but I didn't my ex-husband could do that really naturally, because he had the same experience as you. And it's nothing to do with my parents. They were just doing what was done to them. So don't get me wrong. But I had to consciously do that between Ella's age of 13 to 16. And it's had an impact. I can now do it subconsciously. But it took me consciously realizing that had come into the genome.
And
practicing, and that's not easy, right? But Michael Meaney's research, that's why I say love and attention. I mean that. I mean, you have to be honest and true to yourself about what does your genome look like, you know? But the key, right? What are we talking about? Change. You can change it. And so now I've changed the trajectory for my daughter. I've stuffed Michael Meaney's research up, right? Because I've shown now that, I mean, I'm not passing on my maternal line anymore. And that's the power of brain plasticity and epigenetics. We can change genetic history. And
I know, I love it.
People think you're kind of stuck. That's the key, right? And I can give you examples of people in their 70s, 80s, 90s doing triathlons. I was trying to convince my father last night about telomerase, which is the end of your DNA, which can shrink as you age, but you can reverse it with exercise, meditation. You know, Elizabeth Blackburn's the famous Australian, won a Nobel Prize for this, and she's shown it. And it doesn't mean that, at the age that you're going to die is not written or not. It just means you can live a better life, right? More healthy. I think, as Wim Hof says, who's just trained, he's the Iceman who trained his autonomic nervous system. What he says is everyone has a right to be happy, healthy, and strong, and it's within everybody's reach through very simple things.
Yeah, totally. I love that. And on that note, I suppose we have to go, even though, of course, as a professor, as somebody who is inspiring the world's next generation of amazing scientists, you could go on forever and ever. I will tell everybody the first actual face-to-face conversation Selena and I had was like 5 or 6 hours. And we'd like to invite you on our journey.
We haven't even touched the striatum, the brainstem, the spinal cord, the insula, the...
I know there's so much more. So wasn't everybody go and have a look at Selena's website? I'm going to share with you that you can look at www. Of course, then Selena B, SELENAB.com. That's selenab.com, and go and do everything that you need to do to now follow Selena, learn more from her, join her community, help her share her message, buy her book, buy multiple copies of her book, give it to friends, colleagues, and your family members. There we go. Smashing mindset. Train your brain to reboot, recharge, and reinvent your life. Woo! Let's go. All right. Well, much love. Thank you so much for spending this precious time with us.
Thank you. That was great. Loved it.
All right. Bye.
Bye.